Jonathan Edwards, just quickly, thank you.
Would I be right in summarising that your department is responsible for the free trade agreement with the European Union, and then the International Trade Department is responsible for other trade deals?
Broadly, my department is basically a servant of the Prime Minister, and she's responsible for it. Yep. But yes, broadly, it's not wrong.
Therefore, my question is there any conceivable situation whereby, should negotiations with the Commission be slightly more protracted than what you anticipate, and no deal is reached before we leave on Brexit Day, that other trade deals could be signed before the EU trade deal? Or is it the government's priority to sign the EU trade deal first?
We haven't thought about that concept, because I'm aiming to conclude in the 2 years, and that is the sort of legal end of membership. So that is the point which we're able to sign other deals. But we'll be aiming for 2 years, not for beyond it, because beyond it gets quite complicated to go beyond the end.
Just last one.
Yep.
Should it be that the UK government decided to sign the US trade deal? There's been a lot of noise about that from the Secretary of State for International Trade before the EU trade deal. Do you recognise the difficulties that may create in your ability to finalise the EU trade deal?
It can't be signed before the end of the 2 years.
No, we don't.
All right, it can't be signed before that. By the way, it's not just him. I mean, it's also, apart from the Trump administration, it's also the heads of the Senate and the House of Representatives have also indicated enthusiasm for this. But it can't be done before the 2 years are up. I mean, we can do everything but sign. We can do, but you remember, I think I said last time, that we are bound by a duty of sincere cooperation. So we do not undermine or do not create problems for the rest of the EU in doing what we do, which is why we can't sign until afterwards. But we can certainly do everything else but it won't be, the signature will not be while it's not legal to sign. We will obey the law.
And there's no trade race in between government departments then? There's no trade race between you and the Secretary of State for International Trade to sign the first trade deal?
No, we're not having a race.
Okay. Right, just a couple more questions from the Secretary of State. Are you still confident that we will, at the end of this process, still have access to the data sharing arrangements in the field of justice and home affairs, things like the Schengen Information System, PRUM, ECRIS, which are, as we both know, very, very important to our national security?
Yes, that's our intention, and I do not expect... there will be technical issues, but I do not expect that we will face anything but supportive responses from the European Union.
Okay, thank you. Now, in the White Paper, the government acknowledged that in seeking and hopefully concluding a comprehensive free trade agreement, there will need to be an arbitration mechanism, yes. And the government is allergic to the European Court of Justice. Would the EFTA Court be a possible...
It's not allergic to the European Court of Justice. In this context, if we did a deal with the United States, we wouldn't have the Supreme Court of the United States do be the arbitration mechanism. We will have to design the mechanism to be appropriate. Now, there may be more than one. All right? So you might have one mechanism which applies to trade, and another one to arbitration, justice and home affairs, for example. And there may be different styles. But we will actually we are looking at that, actually. We've already done some work on it. We're looking at putting in place the most decisive, fairest, most effective system. And it may change, it may be different depending on... So in some areas you have arbitration mechanisms, in other areas you have political resolution mechanisms.
Okay.
But the Swiss, and to give you an example, sir, the Swiss position is a political resolution mechanism, and it's not worked. They've ended up really with an unfortunate outcome after their referendum on free movement and so on. So we're looking at evidence on the effectiveness of these things in different contexts, in different parts.
But am I right in understanding it is the direct applicability of ECJ judgments that the government objects to?
Well, we would not. I mean, for exactly the same reason we wouldn't, and it doesn't really matter to the ECJ or any other domestic court. Yeah. For a trade partner, we would not look to a system that was effectively subordinate or even the same as their own domestic court. We'd look for an independent system. So the independence is the key issue, really.
Okay. When can we anticipate seeing the Great Repeal Bill white paper?
Well, I'm aiming. Well, I've told you privately, Chairman, and I don't mind telling the committee. The primary problem here was we had undertaken to show the devolved administrations a copy at least a few days before we put it out in the public domain. And of course, the Northern Ireland situation gives a problem with that. So until we get to the end of the sort of 3-week period. If there's a Northern Ireland executive in place, it'll be very soon after that. If not, it's going to have to be soon anyway, because we need you to see it pretty soon. But I can't give you an exact day yet. Okay. But you will be aware. I'm very conscious that you need to see this document soon, so you can look properly on the upcoming. On the upcoming bill. I mean, I hope you take the point, Chairman. We have taken your request very seriously. The last white paper timing was largely off the back of your own request on timing. I told you at the time it was difficult, and it was, but we managed it. And I'll try and give you this as quickly as we can.
Well, no, I know the committee is very grateful for the speed with which the government responded to our request for a white paper. Can you also confirm, we read it in the newspapers, but that there will be other bills following the Great Reform Bill, dealing potentially with things that are clearly immigration, there's going to be one, maybe financial services, environment, whatever it is.
Yes.
That there will be a series of bills to follow.
Yes, there will be a number of bills. The strategy, if I didn't make it clear before, I apologise. The strategy is to deal with the repeal of the European Communities Act 72 and the translation of the acquis communautaire into the English law in the Great Repeal Bill. You quite rightly renamed it. And the second phase will be dealing with substantive matters in primary legislation, because that's my view, that's how it should be done, and non-substantive matters or less substantive matters in secondary legislation. There will be a number of major bills.
Okay. And the final question from me is this. It's about whether there's anything you want to add to what you said to me in that opening exchange of correspondence we had about how you intend to keep Parliament, but in particular this committee, informed as the negotiations unfold, in addition to what will be your regular appearances before us. Yeah, have you had any...
My excessively regular appearances in front of the House.
I was going to say, we anyway... But how you propose to do that?
We haven't made much progress on that yet. We've said to you already that for the House as a whole, we'll obviously do at least as much as the European Parliament has. We of course don't know what that is yet, truthfully, because this is unique, and so we'll work around that. And beyond that, to some extent, it will depend on what information becomes available. Which, as I said to you, whenever it does not undermine or risk our negotiating stance and therefore the national interest, I will be keen to give you as much information as I can. Quite what that will be at the moment is difficult because we haven't seen the stream of what we get from the Commission, for example, and our response to that. But I just say this to you, I will do what I can to keep you as informed as I possibly can.
And that includes keeping us as informed as the European Parliament will be.
Certainly.
Informed, because the committee, as I'm sure you realise, would not take too kindly to discovering via colleagues in the European Parliament stuff that we hadn't been informed.
We will endeavour to avoid that, and I've given UCREP instructions to that end, and the department instructions to that end some time ago.
That is extremely helpful. We are very grateful to you, Secretary of State, for giving up so much of your time, and Mr. Robbins also, and probably see you again in June, because we do intend to see you regularly, and we are see you regularly, and we are grateful. In addition to all of your many responsibilities and travelling you're engaging in, thank you for coming today. Order, order.
My pleasure.